So you want to know about the history of Doctor Who in video games? No? Okay, not your video then, because this is the history of Doctor Who in video games. It's 1980 and the BBC have started what they called the BBC Computer Literacy Project. This'll go somewhere, I swear. The project came about in response to ITV's Mighty Micro series in which Dr. Christopher Evans predicted a microcomputer revolution. Something along these lines. So the BBC wanted to create their project on a microcomputer capable of performing a variety of tasks that would be shown in their series, the computer program. The ambitious computer had many companies designing and pining for the contract with the BBC. It was Acorn Computers that eventually landed the deal, and based on their initial prototype, the BBC signed off on the company to make what was eventually known as the BBC Microcomputer, released in December 1981. A greater discussion and history on the BBC Micro can be found on Lazy Game Review's channel. There is a link down below, go watch that if you want to know more about the BBC Micro. 1982 also brought the birth of another similar computer, the Commodore 64. This one had much more graphical power than the Micro, but more on that computer shortly. Despite some unofficial titles which came to the Micro, such as Time Lords, 1983 saw the first official instance of a Doctor Who video game with The First Adventure. Outside of its box art and the pixel TARDIS, there wasn't much to tie this to the franchise. The title featured 4 mini-games that felt like a poor man's Pac-Man, Frogger, Space Invaders, and Battleships. You were given 15 lives and 60 minutes to complete the game. The game's doctor was supposedly Peter Davison, but the crosshair right there? That's your only visual representation of him in the game. 2 years later, we were granted with one of the oldest types of video games, a text adventure. Doctor Who and the Warlord centered on you, the player, as you try to track down the Doctor. Think of this as an early version of Love and Monsters, if you will, if you want to, if you ever want to think of Love and Monsters. The game was split into 2 parts. Part A had you encounter interstellar gypsies, androids, and the dreaded King Wagner's bodyguards on your quest to find the Time Lord. Part B had you flung back in time by the TARDIS to the Battle of Waterloo, where you would need to type your mind out to defeat Napoleon and the titular warlord. We will return to the pixel world of Doctor Who with the Mines of Terror. The title began life as a sequel to the BBC Micro game Castle Quest, but was adapted to fit the Doctor Who license while still in development. The 2D platformer featured the 6th Doctor and his robot cat Splinks. Yes, that's real. The basic plot is that the Master has obtained a device on the planet Ridjar? It's made up. This device can rearrange time and is mining a compound known as heatonite, vital to the device's function. The Doctor is sent to the planet by the Time Lords along with Splinks to halt the Master's plan. The game features puzzles, jumping levels, and enemies. One such enemy were Dalek-like patrol bots. However, the Khaled machines couldn't be included due to creator Terry Nation's firm grip on the Daleks' rights. Whilst the Mines of Terror was available for the aforementioned Commodore 64, 1992's Dalek Attack is the first game to leave the BBC Micro behind completely. Dalek Attack, the 2D side-scrolling platformer, puts you in the 7th, 4th, or 5th Doctor's shoes as the Daleks once again invaded planet Earth. This time to conquer the planet and make it a Dalek production ground. But the Professor won't have any Dalek hanky-panky on Earth, so he shoots, jumps, and glides his way through numerous locations from London, New York, Paris, Tokyo, and Skaro. One of these things is not like the other. A second player could also jump in and help as Ace or a unit soldier. This game was released on a variety of platforms, and whilst most kept the same game, the Spectrum version of the game modified some elements. Only the 7th Doctor and Ace were available as their respected roles, and the opening level was shifted from the Doctor on a hoverboard to the Doctor on foot. The MS-DOS version of the game also swapped out the 5th Doctor for the 2nd Doctor. The game, unlike all the other ones, is actually currently available to play online via a Commodore 64 emulation of the game. There's a link for that down below. Moving on, and in 1997, BBC Multimedia and Studio Fish released Destiny of the Doctors for Windows 95. The plot is this. The Master is on a planet of pure psychic energy known as Cyrilos. Again, it's made up. Here he harnesses that psychic power and imprisons all 7 incarnations of the Doctor. It is up to you, an electro-telepathic entity created by the Doctor, the Grak, to collect all items the Master requests and eventually free the Doctors from the Master's grip. The game is the first 3-dimensional game for Doctor Who, and it's rather impressive for its time. The main portion will have you in both the Master's and the Doctor's TARDIS, which iteration of the Doctor's TARDIS is dependent on the Doctor you're rescuing. Along the way to the Master, you'll come up against many of the Doctor's foes: Autons, Cybermen, Ice Warriors, Quarks, Yeti, Silurians, Daleks, and more. There were many puzzles and riddles provided by the Master, and each level is actually capped off by a unique boss battle. From jousting a Sontaran on a hoverbike, to racing against the Master in Bessie. The game also featured newly recorded dialogue for Doctors 4 to 7 from their respective actors, with the first and second impersonated by David Coker, and the third Doctor being represented through archived audio from the series. Anthony Ainley also puts in his final performance as the Master through live-action video inserts, and to round off the iconic Who-ness, the entire story for the game was written by Doctor Who legend Terrance Dicks. Destiny of the Doctors would be the final Doctor Who video game in just over a decade, and in that time, home video game consoles underwent some major changes. In 2000, the PlayStation 2 was released to the world. The PS2 went on to be the best-selling video game console of all time, selling 150 million copies in its lifespan. In 2004, the Nintendo DS was brought to life, offering dual-screen play, and in 2006, Nintendo released another console in the form of the Wii, utilizing a motion-sensing controller and an additional nunchuck controller. And after all this amazing innovation, 11 years of innovation, Doctor Who returned to the video game market with Doctor Who Top Trumps. Basically a poor man's Hearthstone. Like a really poor man, because Hearthstone is already free. The game is a video game version of Top Trumps, the game you never play, but own all the card packs because they look cool. Did it break? I think it broke. Each player receives a deck of cards and must choose which card will, hopefully, be higher than the other players. The winner keeps the loser's card, and whoever gets all the cards wins! The game featured cards from Series 1 to 3 of the show, with the players and the general aesthetic of the game taking inspiration from the animated adventures of the Infinite Quest. The game featured both AI and 2-player mode, and that's about it. I mean, the game was mediocre at best, and I guess it did everything it meant to do. It made a Top Trumps game on your telly. But why is that what we got after 11 years? Thankfully, 2 years later, it was the big rejuvenation of 2010, where Matt Smith and Karen Gillan were plastered over every type of merchandise the BBC could find, and that included video games. The first came in the form of the adventure games.
The Doctor, in a new dimension. No, impossible. You take control in Doctor Who The Adventure Games. Run.
The series involved 5 puzzle-based titles, each tying to Matt Smith's era of the show, and featuring the voices of Smith, Karen Gillan, and later Arthur Darvill in their roles from the show. Series 1 featured 4 episodes, as they were known. City of Daleks was set in an alternate 1963 where the Daleks successfully invaded and conquered Earth. Blood of the Cybermen was set in the Arctic as a survey team are slowly turning into metal, with an army of Cybermen waiting under the ice for thousands of years. The third was simply titled TARDIS, and centered on the accidental leak of an entity, trapping the Doctor and Amy in different periods of time. Each game was fairly similar in design. You'll be doing puzzle mini-games, dodging enemies with radial detection, and some jumping puzzles involving boxes. They were very linear, but still pretty fun. There's also additional collectibles scattered throughout the games. Though they did give no advantage or ability in the game, they offered additional replayability for the games. Each episode has collectible cards that give information on characters from the series. In addition to this, some objects can be clicked on to give real-world history. The game was received well by the public, and a second series was commissioned by the BBC. Something that was also somehow commissioned by the BBC was Doctor Who Evacuation Earth. The game had the 11th Doctor and Amy arrive in the Lake District amidst Ironically, the evacuation of Earth. The TARDIS is taken by one of the evacuation ships and the duo must get on board. Doing so, they discover a Silurian ship has attached itself below the human ship, Lucy Gray. Chaos and, eventually, because it's a Doctor Who game, Daleks ensue. Well, as much chaos as a 2D logic puzzle game can do. The game wasn't anything amazing, but it did manage to be an interesting, lengthy game that Nintendo Magazine gave a score of 69%. Luckily, it wasn't the last Doctor Who Nintendo release of 2010. Luckily is a bit of a stretch. The next game was a sequel of sorts to Evacuation Earth, titled Return to Earth. The duo returns to a now deserted starship Lucy Gray. However, the ship now contains the Time Axis, what is that? I don't know. And the Daleks and Cybermen are after it too. So you've got to stop those enemies by doing this!
Safety first, soldier! Take cover! Easy.
And this. And more of this.
My trusty son never fails.
I mean, this game is so bad that Nicholas Briggs, the man who milks his monster voice dry, wouldn't even sign on to do the voice of the Daleks and the Cybermen. Good Game flat out said that this is one of the worst games they've ever played. The single greatest thing that came out of this game was this. It's the Sonic Wii remote. Like, this is awesome. Like, this has more potential than that entire game. I have never used it. Does it even turn on? No. And the mobile market got its first official taste of Doctor Who in Mazes of Time. Surprise, surprise! It's another puzzle game based on Doctor Who. The plot follows Eleven and Amy trying to save an innocent family that are thrown through time and space by a rogue Dalek. What? Along the way you face Cybermen, Silurians, and of course Daleks in a variety of locations. This plot could only be written by the genius behind Return to Earth and Evacuation from Earth, Ollie Smith. It kinda isn't his fault, they're just bad games. He might have written a good story, the games just didn't let that story happen. But thankfully this game is the least reliant on its plot, instead focusing itself on its third-person puzzle rooms, allowing you to control the Doctor or Amy using an on-screen joystick. The interesting addition is that most rooms require Amy and the Doctor to help each other through, as each of them have unique abilities. Also, this is the first title not to feature Matt Smith and Karen Gillan doing their voices, though Matt Smith did seem to enjoy it.
Oh, Kaz is going to come, is she? Oh, I see. So you play with them both?
But staying in 2010, what a year! And the year was rounded off with a final adventure game in the forms of Shadows of the Vashta Nerada, with the duo now on an underwater base dealing with an alien shark, radiation, and the Vashta Nerada. Weirdly timed with that alien shark, considering 3 days later there was an alien shark in A Christmas Carol. The game offered nothing new to the adventure game franchise outside of a new setting and enemies, but it rounded off the first series of the adventure games. But over to 2011 now, and it gave us but a single new Who game in the form of another adventure game. The Gunpowder Plot has the Doctor, Amy, and now Rory in 17th century London as they unearth the conflict between the Sontarans and the Rutans. And because it's Doctor Who, this all connects to Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. Despite claiming to be the first in another 4-episode series, the Gunpowder Plot would be the final adventure game, with the rest pulled from release supposedly due to budgetary and investment issues. Thankfully, the following year, we were treated to two of my personal favourite Doctor Who video games. In March, it was Worlds in Time, Doctor Who's only MMORPG. An MMORPG is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. So you could basically create your own character, choosing from a variety of races, get in the TARDIS and complete challenges set by the 11th Doctor. The quest involved mini-games in the form of puzzles, lock-picking, fighting enemies, and many more click and drag based puzzles. The game also featured in-game microtransactions to purchase additional items with real money, and according to the BBC, the goal for the game was to become the largest Doctor Who community ever assembled. But, sadly, on January 2014, less than 2 years later, it was announced that the game's servers and the game itself would be shutting down. There was no reason given by the BBC, but sadly it wasn't the last Doctor Who game to be cancelled. Still in 2012, and Doctor Who The Eternity Clock was released on PlayStation 3 in May, and was the biggest and most professional attempt at a Doctor Who video game yet. The game featured both Matt Smith and Alex Kingston not just providing their voices, but also providing motion capture performances. These were then translated into the game. The game was the first of a trilogy of side-scrolling adventures, the basic premise being the Doctor and River are on a quest to gather the pieces of the Eternity Clock, an object that records all of time and space. Think of it as the Key to Time Part 2. The game features enemies in the form of the Daleks, Cybermen, Silurians, and the Silence, and had players, once again, diving into minigames and apparently decision-making that could lead to endless possibilities, though that claim never came to fruition. Whilst the annoyingly persistent core gameplay mechanic of mini-games and puzzles are still here from every Doctor Who video game, the game certainly does a lot right. You take control of the Doctor or River depending on what area you are at in the game. If you've got two players, the screen will split in half and one player will be completing the Doctor section whilst the other completes River's. There's timey-wimey related puzzles in that River is in the past and the Doctor the future, and so River is able to help by impacting the future and vice versa. There's clever collectibles like hats for the Doctor, with descriptions by Matt Smith.
I can still smell the freshly cut grass, the linseed oil. And is that the faint tang of spectroxtoxemia?
And diary entries for Riversong. The sonic screwdriver isn't a gun because Riversong has one and she can take care of that, so there's no liberties taken for game's sake, and graphically it's pretty damn polished. And yet, the reception of the game was poor, with most sites not giving it anything above 50%. The game was all but panned by critics, and so despite a cliffhanger ending, all future iterations were put on hold in 2013.
Very powerful control signal. Who would do this, huh? Who has the power?
Doctor! It's sinking with the TARDIS's engines! It's taking over the ship!
No, it's locked. Wherever the clock wants to go, that's where we go. And you know what that means.
It'd be 3 years before another legitimate Doctor Who title, but that didn't stop the BBC from milking the franchise. In 2013, we were treated to a god-awful attempt at publicising Doctor Who's 50th by including paid downloadable content for PlayStation's Home. Laid out as a three-wave expansion, Wave 1 included an 11th Doctor, Riversong, Silurian and Silent costume, as well as a Cybermat companion and of course a TARDIS in the form of a property or clubhouse. This may have been the saving grace of this entire stupid investment, because it was bigger on the inside. Ish. Wave 2 featured Daleks, Cybermen and K9 furniture options, as well as a fez and mop for the already existing Doctor outfit. And as usual, the final wave of accessories never arrived. There's been no official word, but it has been 4 years. An honourable mention in terms of being a legitimate Doctor Who game would also go to Doctor Who Say What You See. It was a mobile puzzle app where you did just that. Looked at an image and tried to decipher names of episodes, characters, monsters, and more. Later in the year, Doctor Who Legacy was released for mobile and tablet devices. It was pitched as a celebration of Doctor Who's 50 years, with characters from the show's history in a Candy Crush RPG. The game's loose story is that the 11th Doctor and Vastra landed in 1978 and discovered that the Earth has been prematurely invaded by the Sontarans. They've acquired time travel and are rewriting their planet's history. The game then adds new threats as the chapters roll on. The game's mechanic is that you play a level by means of matching 3 or more coloured gems that then provide power for your character's attack. Within each level there is a chance drop of numerous in-game items as well as a character which you can then add to your roster. The more you use a character, the more they'll level up and become stronger until you have the highest level 1-year-old in the galaxy. Or the universe. Galaxy's very Star Wars. Legacy is kind of the only Doctor Who game to continue to have support. The game has just added Dr. Mysterio themed levels and characters, and you guys on Twitter have told me that you are still addicted. So if you're looking for a Doctor Who game that still has a community and developer support, this may still be the one. But moving on, and 2014 brought official Doctor Who skins to the Minecraft world. First on Xbox One, and later to PlayStation. 2 packs were released, each containing over 50 skins, and not just from the modern series either, from all over the 50 years of the show's history. From obscure to iconic, Minecraft went all out. Then finally in 2015, the biggest moment in Doctor Who's history, subjectively, Doctor Who went Lego. September brought the multi-franchise based video game LEGO Dimensions, and when your central plot revolves around a time and space hopping villain, the Doctor is going to be involved. The game's main plot features one level solely in the Doctor Who world. A delectable adventure has Batman, Wildstyle and Gandalf bump into the Doctor mid-dimension jump. He then drops them off on a cyber ship where Doctor Who nerdgasm ensues. And I don't just mean the amount of enemies and locations jam-packed into this. Seriously, every inch of this level is filled with Who trivia and nostalgia, but I ain't gonna spoil that for you. The Daleks, Doctor and Cyberman return later as well. Seriously, this game is jam-packed with Who-ness.
Someone's using this rift technology like a Gallifreyan time scoop. They're pulling in monsters and madmen from everywhere.
We noticed.
But that should stop whoever's behind this tracking you from now on.
The game is also a toy-to-life affair and as such requires real-world LEGO packs to unlock elements in the game. One such pack is this, the Doctor Who Story Pack. It unlocks the Doctor and all 13 incarnations, the TARDIS and a ride on K9. But the most important bit is that it also unlocks a 45-minute level as well as an open-world Doctor Who hub. The level is titled The Dalek Extermination of Earth, and has the Doctor once again attempting to halt a Dalek invasion. But this one is kind of done the best. Is that a sentence? You'll be hopping between 3 time zones to adjust the world around you to solve puzzles and help you reach areas. You'll visit London, Trenzalore and Skaro in order to defeat the Daleks and save the day. That's the level pack, whilst the hub world combines a whole bunch of Who locations into one landmass. Mars, Telos, Skaro, Trenzalore, the 3W facility from Deep Water, the Silurian lair from Cold Blood, as well as the 21st and 19th century London. Across the world, the likes of Captain Jack and Madame Vastra will help you along with missions to complete. You can of course fly the time machine. Oh, and get inside! Within you'll be able to swap between each incarnation of the Time Lord, and when you re-enter the TARDIS, you'll be greeted by the respective Doctor's control room. As well as the level pack, a fun pack was released with a playable Cyberman and rideable Dalek. So yes, LEGO Dimensions is kind of the most Doctor Who game, whilst not being a Doctor Who game out there. I definitely recommend it. It might cost a little bit on top of the already pricey starter pack, but LEGO Doctor Who! And finally, back in 2015, a little anticlimactic, I will admit, LittleBigPlanet 2 allowed you to play as some of Doctor Who's iconic characters through 4 level packs. A 12th, 11th, 10th and 4th Doctor character pack were released, each containing characters relevant to their eras. Well, that was somewhat of a down ending, so I'm going to leave you with this, the most exciting thing to happen in Doctor Who gaming history. So from a pixel crosshair that is apparently Peter Davison to a fully fledged regeneratable Doctor, Doctor Who has come a long way in the world of video games. It's by no means met its perfect incarnation. One thing is for certain though, the BBC love to cancel things. Well, thanks for watching. I am so out of breath right now, but do you want more of these history videos, maybe a little bit shorter on more specific characters, stories, or another merchandise video? Let me know down in the comments what you want to see, and hit that subscribe or like button, or both. Both would be amazing, but I'm not going to make you do anything. Until the next time, the Doctor of Who out. Oh, missed.